Hi, my name's
Mac, and I participated in the 2025 Game Maker's Toolkit Game Jam. The Game Jam lasted 96 hours, and it was followed by a ranking period where I played and ranked 105 games. I wanted to talk a bit about my development process, how my game did, show off some cool games that I played, and what I learned so that I can do better next year. At 1 p.m. of day 1, the theme, Loop, was announced. Before brainstorming, I set out some goals for myself this year. Goal 1 was to create a game with Godot. Originally, my next step from Game Maker Studio 2 was going to be Unity, but after that monetization policy fiasco, I lost trust with them. I chose Godot over Unreal because I figured I'd be better off with an open source engine backed by passionate people to make games that I fully own. Even if it can be a bit more difficult to learn due to the lack of resources and doesn't have as many features, I'm betting on Godot just like how I'm betting on Blender for 3D modeling for the future. My second goal was to create a 3D game since all games I've worked on were 2D, and my third goal was to make a web build since people are more willing to play those compared to executables. These goals are related to my 2023 GMTK Jam entry where my submission didn't do well. I figure part of the reason is because it was an executable instead of a web game, and maybe it wasn't as fun as I had imagined, though it was a 48-hour jam instead, and it's quite hard to make something in that time. So as an extra bonus goal, I wanted to place in the top half of games instead of the bottom half this year. But even if I didn't place in the top half, it was still good practice. With my goals planned, I moved to brainstorming. I like to start with a judgment-free brainstorm where I just write down whatever comes to mind, then critically examine it later. I find this is also great in groups, since if you start nitpicking the few people who do have an idea and present it, no one else will want to share in fear of being immediately judged and dismantled. Here are the ideas I came up with. First one was a racing game. The loop theme is self-explanatory if you use a track, but it's kind of a generic idea. To expand on that, I thought of the rat race, where you play as a rat and have to run around delivering job applications while trying to beat up the rats there, but no one would ever call back and you'd be stuck in an endless loop of applying. The narrative is darkly funny and personal and could have been interesting for the jam, but I worried about how well a 3D web game using Godot would perform. My next idea was something with roller coaster loops. Either a roller coaster simulator or an FPS game on a roller coaster, or a game where you'd have to do QuickTime events to try and snipe a bot who's on a roller coaster parallel but going the opposite way as you. It sounded okay, but pretty gimmicky and without much expansion potential. I wrote down a couple weaker ideas like a ring toss, a time loop game, or something about being in the social loop, but I felt like my ideas were starting to go off track until I thought of a game about tying knots. I thought this idea had a lot of potential and could be either like a game where you have to tie knots to keep ships, or it could even be like a WarioWare style where there's a bunch of fast mini games. But after doing some research, I found that real-time rope physics would tank my web performance, so I ultimately ended up going for my last idea. Mobius Gauntlet, a game where you have to loop around a track of dungeon while dodging obstacles. I got this idea after thinking about a looping dungeon crawler where you keep entering the same room and looking up synonyms for the word loop, and seeing the Mobius strip. If you don't know, a Mobius strip is basically, and this is a very basic definition, a surface that rotates and connects back with itself so it only has one side and one edge. As in, if you drew a line on a Mobius strip, since it rotates when it connects back to itself, you can draw all the way around it without lifting your pencil. If you're just listening to this and lost, I threw some visuals on the screen to help you understand. With my game idea planned, I made a quick list of some assets I would need. I don't know if this list actually helped me since I didn't look at it again, but it did make me think of all the little things I would need, which probably did help in the long run. Anyways, the idea I set out to make was a character who has to progress through a dungeon that gets more difficult every loop. I figured that'd be the best way to incorporate the loop theme. Now, like I said, I was worried that 3D might not be performant, especially since I didn't really know what I was doing. I had been playing around with a program called Blockbench to make low poly models, so I figured I'd do my 3D models in Blockbench and my UI elements using Sprite, which is my preferred pixel art program. Since I wanted to make sure my game would run on lower end hardware, and to make the game a bit more tactical, I thought of making the game update once a second. The game runs independent of the player's actions, and their task is to react in time. Since the game updates based on the time instead of frames, even if the game was running at 5 FPS, it still worked just as well as the game was running at 1000 FPS. So I booted up Godot, chose the web compatibility option for the first time, booted up Blockbench, and got to work. Since the size of my floor tiles would determine the size of everything else, I made the floor tile first. I used a regular capsule to represent my player for a while. Here's some of the dev vlogs cut up from the first day. So, the idea here is that you're gonna be a character and you're gonna have to go left and right as these tiles with like different obstacles and stuff come towards you. So if I press D and then enter, oh, we're kind of on the tile. So the idea is that it does these like nice half steps, so you can see them moving towards you, but my issue is that I've got it like just add half steps right now, and sometimes it does that instead of those like little half step jumps like that. I don't know why it's doing that. We're gonna figure that out, but we've got something going to start. Alright, I forget if I recorded it, but I did get something going eventually. This is gonna be the main idea here. I think I'll have like, maybe I could even zoom it out and raise the camera even more and make the player even smaller. But the idea is I'm going to have walls on both sides and they'll kind of trail off into the distance. And anything past that row 5 or maybe even row 8, I might change it, make it a little easier to see into the future. But that'll all kind of fade off into the distance. And the idea is that you're going to have to move like every 2 or so seconds. A timer's going to go and you're going to have to do this and then move to the correct tile, right? It's gonna keep coming at you. That's kind of the idea. Okay, it's the night of the first day, and let me tell you, it's buggered. I don't know what happened. Something happened. I tried making it. Let's see if I can find it here. Like a little thing, like a little resource that it would load in, but it's like that's not a part of the grid that's moving. And it's spawning a grid that moves. I don't know. Something just totally screwed up here. I'm gonna have to try something again. As a quick recap of day 1, I chose the goals I wanted to achieve for this jam, brainstormed and picked an idea, made some list of the assets and systems I would need, then got coding and created my basic grid movement system. Day 2. Today's goals were to add in obstacles and empty floor detection, then we're starting the game with the player lost. I was about 6 hours behind where I wanted to be, since it took me most of the morning to figure out some of the bugs in my grid tile system. When developing the grid, I made an interesting decision. Instead of having the player move forwards every update, I'll be calling it, I decided instead that the world should move towards them, as in move towards the player. I thought this would simplify a few things. Instead of relying on player collision detection, I could just keep track if a tile was dangerous or not. I could check if the player ended up on that tile, so it would save a lot of the processing power on collision detection each frame. Using a grid would also make it easier to play with a 3D space, since I could rotate my camera around or change the size of my models and the logic would work the same. That would still work if my player was moving forwards, but another reason I wanted my player to stay on the same row is because I wanted to try adding in shaders. I thought that having my objects at a known distance away all the time could make the shader calculation easier. I wanted to do like a halftone shader where objects far away were less visible, basically. But when I tried applying shaders to my objects, I ran into a bunch of issues, possibly because of the file format I exported them as, which was GLB. It just wasn't working the way I wanted it to, and I knew it would make the game run even slower on the web, so I dropped them. Now, if you're not keen on programming, I'll let you in on a little secret. There's several ways to do things, and sometimes you don't choose the best way to do it. And the more you do something that is not the best way, the more and more difficult it will become to expand on that system. If you're a solo dev and have the time, you can either work on it for years, or take the time to change it, but if you're in a game jam, sometimes you have to plow ahead. I think that's how I ended up with the grid system from hell that makes everything in my scene move towards the player, and not my player towards the objects. But I did eventually figure out my grid system issues, and I got to the next step. Hey, another little update here. Whoops. Plus is my start recording hotkey, so I gotta remember every time I'm in the editor, it'll do that. Working on some basic obstacles here. It kinda works. If I press again, you'll see no tile exists if I do that. Oh. Let's restart it quick. The timing's slightly off, I gotta figure out why, but obstacle exists, yippee. I think it's because my player is moving and then it checks the old position, so if I do it at wherever the player ends up, then it should work just fine. Okay, oh, is it recording? Cool. So I had this bug that was driving me mad, right? I have my empty tiles, my obstacles, and every time I'm like, it seems like it's off by one. If I do this, that should say no tile exists, right? And then it's off by one. It's like I had to move again for it to actually trigger. But I'll show you, it's the same thing with the like the tree as well. No obstacle exists. No obstacle exists. If I go one more, for this obstacle exists for some strange reason, right? But if I remove a bunch of my rows. Then I start off the map. And then it works, no tile exists. If I do it again for my tree, obstacle exists. Why? Why? God, why? Why is it like that? Okay. It's 3:45, basically. And, no obstacle, no tile, no tile. Tile, 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 no obstacle, no obstacle, obstacle. No obstacle, no obstacle, no obstacle, obstacle. I want to go the other way. No tile, no obstacle. Tile, tile, tile. No tile. Okay. I ended up, let's see here. Just popping this top row off every time and then checking the values and just not worrying about anything else. I think that should be fine. Okay, it is 9:45 on the second evening. I just recorded a mini update and I realized I hit stream instead, so now I've got a random Twitch VOD of this, what is supposed to happen, but I don't think I showed to the features, so now I've got an actual timer, and I think it'd be cool if I showed which like action you queued up, like I'll have a left, right, space bar, use the item queued up, so you can see I've hit space bar and I will jump over the gap. Or if I go over and actually we'll do the obstacle first, why not? Hit the obstacle, wow, resets. Or if I go into the pit, wow, it resets, that's so cool. There we go. It is, like I said, very close to a minimum viable product, so we got like the start, the stop, a couple obstacles. We are on our way. Okay, making sure I'm not streaming this time. It's 11:15. I think I'm good for the night. We got, you know, our level. And then once we reach the end, I didn't want it to like, I don't know why it's doing this kind of like looping thing, but that's okay, because we reach the end. We go here and we're on to another level. We're on to Mountain 1. And then we should go on to, if we go into Mountain 2, we're good. Yeah, yeah, we're in Mountain 2. Cool. And yeah, it should restart the level. Cool. If I really wanted to, I could make it restart the loop maybe too. Might be a little bit of extra loud. This is probably good enough. So as a recap, on day 2, I mostly fixed my grid system, added some obstacles, and made a transition and level reset, so I was back on track. Day 3, I set out to add the framework for my items that would help destroy obstacles and add my UI elements. I'll just roll the devlogs here since I already talked about where I messed up with my core design of my game. Oops, gotta delete that. I've got my hotkey set up to the plus button, so whenever I hit record, I gotta remember to remove it if I'm in the window. Okay, so I haven't done an update yet today. It is currently 8:32 p.m. on the Wednesday to Thursday, Thursday to Friday. A little bit more than halfway through. Halfway through plus 7 hours, give or take. Okay, so 2 things so far. Number 1, I've got this nice UI now, and if I hit whatever, it'll show you what you've queued up before you actually do it. And the other thing is I've got these items. I've got this hammer. A hammer is going to be either the first or the second item you pick up. It's just easy enough to design, so I did it first. And now you can queue up your item is one of the things that you can do, so do that, and we used our hammer. If we do this and then move, we don't actually use it. And yeah, I think we're gonna do an item at the end of the dungeon levels that goes from forest to mountain to dungeon, so we can do that. And yeah, maybe we'll do one final level where you have to like use all 3 of your items, and that should be good. Maybe I can send the player back to the forest. Right now I'm just sending them back to whatever level. We'll see how long the levels actually are. If they're fairly long, like upwards of a minute each, then I will just send them back to the start of the level, but I don't think they should be that long, like maybe like 30 seconds, maybe not even. just so that you can get through the loops and, you know, see the actual full game. You know? I'm still not sure why it's doing this, like, you can see, because I thought I was popping out the rows every time it goes back, but I guess it's still loading something, or it's loading the level again. But yeah, it's fine. It's just like a little visual thing. Oh. What the? Oh. Oh, I finished. Okay. I see. There we go. That'll do it. It's the last update of the night of night 3? Night 3, then I have all of next day, and then the morning of the next day to make sure stuff is good. I'm hoping to have this, like, add all the sounds and the last 2 items, and maybe the last 2 obstacles, 2 or 3 obstacles tomorrow. It shouldn't be so bad. I'm just expanding on my base obstacle script now. I figured out a lot of the headache of making my silly system work. I really should have just stuck with colliding with things to make things happen. Go in. You got Crusher and a barrel. If I jump into the Crusher, of course the game, our level's over. Crusher goes up and just pass just fine. Got this barrel here, jump it. There's a little visual bug with the barrel not being like on the right tile when it's on row 0, but that's only visual. It should be fine. Of course, if I use my hammer, I can destroy the rocks. I'm gonna destroy the barrel too, but just don't think I have any more programmed up here. I'll just, oh, that's right, I don't have a okay, hold on. Let's see. Forest 2. Actually, we'll do Mountain 2 instead. We'll throw a few barrels in there. Oops. I hit the wrong button. That's okay. It's not like you would go into the barrel anyways because it's moving to the side, which is one of the little tricky tricks I wanted to pull. Yeah, you saw the barrel did get destroyed. You know, maybe I'll add an axe to help clear out the trees. And part of the challenge will be swapping between the items. And maybe some particles. We'll do sounds. Sounds more important. Maybe particles and stuff gets destroyed. And that should be good. As a recap for day 3, I added my items and UI as planned. I was definitely starting to feel the crunch though, and I knew I would have to kick it into high gear tomorrow. Since I spent the last 3 days setting up my game's core systems, as in the grid, the player movement, obstacle spotting, and detection, I knew that day 4 was going to be about actually making the levels and the frills like a main menu, settings, sound effects, and music. By the end of day 4, as in the night before the game was due, not the last 24 hours, I wanted to have a demo that I could upload for my friends to playtest. It's also important to have at least a build up early just in case something happens, like you lose power in your entire city for some reason. It won't be the best version of your game, but at least you'll have something if something happens. My goals for day 4 were to add sound, a menu, a dialogue system for my game to add the story, replace my placeholder assets, and build the actual levels. Last update before I really hunkered down on the level design here, because I have been spending this entire time setting up base systems and stuff, but if I look at how much stuff is on here now, your mind's gonna be blown at what I've made today. Alright, you ready for this? We got a menu. We've got sound. Godot has a cool accessibility for buttons that starts, so you can do like a tab group, and I found out how to make it start, so you don't even need a mouse to play this, which is pretty cool. We've got cutscene. We've got that little thing that shows you which thing you're on, and you can see it goes back and forth. We got background music and different music that plays in the actual level. I was just put it to a high ahead level for testing, but yeah, this sound, like the items and stuff. This is one of the last ones we'll die here. But yeah, everything's got a little sound. My character's doing a little dodge. I don't even think I had my character model last time I did an update, so that should be a big shocker surprise too. And we got New items even, like it, oh man, it's so good. And here's the boss fight. I don't have anything in the actual boss fight yet, but yeah, the wizard will be hovering over you, casting spells and stuff, quote unquote. He's just hovering there. I think I'll have him like cut in half or something. I was gonna have, maybe I still could. Maybe I still could. I just have to figure out how to do it. I could maybe like swap scenes and then show like the entire world and then do like an animation of it cutting in half. Maybe. We'll see. I think I can make that fairly quickly tomorrow, but I've got to make the actual levels today to make sure I have something to upload. That is my update for today. After building my character model, I cloned it, reposed it, made a hood and broom to make my evil wizard character. I also changed my floor tile texture since the outline clashed with my knight that had an outline on his armor. It took me until nearly midnight to have a playtest for my girlfriend to try, and they were pretty tired from the day and couldn't finish it. But they gave some helpful suggestions, particularly to add a toggle to change the font. I hadn't done this or even seen it in a different game jam before, but knew it should logically be possible, so I figured I would try to get that working the next morning. I woke up on day 5, nervous since I knew there were a few more features that I wanted to add before submission time. Some updates to the main menu, including a control scheme display, a toggle to allow for font changing, a circle to show the timing of when the grid was going to move, and a proper ending. I was able to implement all of those. The ending was a little bit scuffed since I made it in the last few hours, but it all worked just in time. It's done, it's over, it's submitted, it's playable on web. Maybe I will play it on web, hold on. Show you that it is actually playable on web here. There are ways to change the starting when I'm like, I don't want to waste my time doing that. I want to make sure stuff's ready right up to the end. We got some cool new features here, readable font. Changes to my classic favorite Public Sans black. We'll enable both of them, why not? I'll show you what it looks like. So it's a bit laggy on Chrome, not gonna lie here. But that's okay, because it's only supposed to go one at a time. Real scuffed update here, let me tell you. Readable font, timing circle, go. There we go. See how much smoother that is now? I don't know, Chrome absolutely sucks for playing things as OpenGL games. Yeah, we've got different font options and a timing circle to help people. Yeah, if you listen, I tried finding a song with 120 BPM so that my crushing sounds would match up, and I think it worked fairly well. It's not always on beat, because, you know, if the levels take a second to load and stuff, but I think it works fairly well. There we go. This part, oh, there's a rock there. Yeah, that made the last part a little bit easier. And... wait, stop. Then we hit the outro scene. Hit him with the scissor, cut the strip, and we are out. That's the game. I think my screenshots are kind of cool, the name's kind of cool. The font's kind of cool. I'm hoping I'll get some, I'm hoping for like top 1,000. I will be ecstatic if I get top 1,000. And that is a wrap on my development. All I could do now is hope that people liked my game, which I'll get into in a minute. But for the time being, I wanted to play a good handful of games and try leaving a nice or constructive comment on as many as possible. I wanted to do that, since I remember how hurtful it was to get a bunch of 1-star reviews on my 2023 game without any actual feedback. I think barely anyone played it, since it was a low-quality looking download-only game from an account with only one game. I don't blame people for thinking it looked a little bit sketchy, but we all have to start somewhere, right? There were a few missing features and effects that would have made my game look and play better. These include flying obstacles. My crushers had an up position that punished the player for jumping into them, but I wanted something like a bird they had to duck under. This could have also been like a bridge, where the farthest 2 tiles were blocked and the middle 3 tiles could only be walked under, for example. Maybe I could have done that to force the player to use their items at one point to make sure they know how to use them before the final level. I wanted to have multi-tile obstacles, kind of like what I said before, different floor tiles for each biome will also go on the sides of my map. This was a purely cosmetic thing, but would have reinforced the different biomes more. And lastly, instead of having several smaller loops and fading to black, I wanted an effect where the walls would go down, new walls would go up, and the new level would load in front of the player. I think that would also visually reinforce that it was one long strip instead of looping around. Anyways, I played a good variety of games. Download-only games, games on the web, Unity, Godot, and a couple of GameMaker and Unreal Engine games. I was kind of surprised to see how many Godot devs and games there were, but I think a lot of those people had a similar story to me when choosing their engine. They bailed from Unity or just chose Godot as a lightweight alternative. On the opposite of lightweight, I found that every Unreal Engine game I downloaded was at least like a gigabyte, whereas all the other games were only a few megabytes. But still, I tried leaving a comment on as many games as I could, and ended up leaving comments on somewhere like 80 to 90 of the 105 games I played. Pretty good, I would say. If you're curious, here's the order in which I chose games to play. First was the games of people who reviewed my game to be played. Next was the games by people doing the same thing as me without begging people to play their games, since it does take a lot of time and effort to play those games and leave a thoughtful comment. Next was the interesting looking games whenever you clicked on the HIO available games to play. And finally, I played a handful of games with the lowest amount of ratings since they showed up in a special category, and I tried them to be nice. Granted, a lot of the games in that category were also straight up broken, unfinished, unpolished, or just illegal entries like games made before the jam or blatant advertisements. Of all the games I played, here are some of my favorites. There's no particular order here, I'm just going to give a brief synopsis and something I thought was cool about them that I'd like to keep in mind for the future. Games were judged out of 5 stars on narrative, creativity, art, music, and enjoyment. So if you hear me reference any of those terms, that's why. I'll note that I didn't rate any game lower than 2 stars in any category, except for a few games I played that were obviously trolling or just didn't have something at all like audio. Cubicle is a game about the mundanity of a job. You earn a little bit of money by doing intentionally numbingly simple tasks every day. The game doesn't acknowledge your hard work until you try to leave. You can't actually close the game window by using the standard X button since you get a pop-up encouraging you to stay, or starting to bribe you with things like bonus pay or it starts threatening you. After doing that enough, you do get the opportunity to escape, but if you want to see that, you'll have to play it for yourself. By playing Cubicle, I learned that you can have a very strong narrative using intentionally simple game mechanics. You don't need particularly complex art either. Those game mechanics can help reinforce the theme too. I will also note that some players are annoyed that they couldn't close the game without force closing it, so that's another thing to keep in mind. #Hellsite is a wicked interesting premise based on the social loop, something I thought of but didn't know how to translate into a game. You're in charge of filling people in on the latest trends in a fictional Twitter-like app by collecting people's usernames and various hashtags and using them in a fill-in-the-blank puzzle. You can find the terms by scrolling through the app, clicking on links, going through profiles, going through comments on those links, and so on. It's another nifty way that a simple concept, a fill-in-the-blank puzzle, can be expanded into a game. What's also important here is the modularity. I assume they had systems set up so they can easily make new posts, comments, and hashtags. Train Farm is a little top-down game about defending your house from oncoming bullets. I really enjoyed how the devs set up gameplays, that you had to leave the safety of your house to collect more fuel for your trains, but then go back to refuel them, and some enemies spawn on the edges which required you to leave to kill them. Hoop School Heroes gameplay has you pressing keyboard buttons in time around a loop to balance more hula hoops. It's got a light narrative about protecting the school from being demolished, which is more narrative than most of the games I played had. I found it really fun, and I possibly got the highest score of any player who tested it. But some players were frustrated that the keys that spawned eventually included most of the keyboard, as in not regularly pressed keys like WASD, QER for example, but things like the equal sign, slashes, commas, periods. I really enjoyed that the style blended 2D and 3D figures, but still used 2D for the faces. Also, since the main character was in 3D, the 2D background characters weren't distracting. I also liked that the dev wasn't afraid to go wild with the effects, like spawning in tens of hula hoops or having the score multiplier get so big it took up the screen. The second one was probably unintentional, but I thought it gave the game more charm. Hop Condition was my favorite platformer of this jam. The starting premise is simple: navigate your character to get the carrot. But every time you get the carrot, a new window opens, each with their own extra condition. A spike you have to jump over, a ledge, carrots that spawn in the air, and so on. The catch in the end being that you can only play in one of these windows at a time, but you want to play in a way that satisfies every other window to get the carrot. Again, reinforcing that a very simple concept, like a platformer, can be greatly expanded on considering the jam theme. Having cute pixel art also helps. I will note that in Hop Condition's case, I think the devs pushed the idea to its limits. It would be pretty difficult to expand on the core concept with new levels in a full game, but I think Hop Condition had a perfect length and was a great jam entry. Captain Eddie and the Cult of the Kraken was a tour de force of what a team can accomplish together. You play on a ship and can go between navigating it, firing cannons at cultist ships, and repairing your ship, all while circling a giant kraken who is trying to destroy you. You collect some objects from the destroyed cultists before destroying the towers, protecting and ultimately killing the kraken. The art style is great and handling the cannons felt smooth. Will Them Dogs is another clever use of the loop theme and using a simple concept as well. You walk around a tiny planet and fire a ball that spins around it and try to knock off dogs while not hitting chickens. Hitting 10 chickens is a game over. Simple concepts are executed well, and these kinds of arcadey games prove to be pretty popular for their replayability. Granted, they don't usually have a narrative, since they're just get the best score possible. Drumhead was an interesting game where you play as a fighting drum kit, and you have to pre-plan your attacks as a drum pattern, choosing which beats to do things like move, punch, and block. I liked that it was a puzzle game, but using something very thematic, like drum loops. I played another kind of game like that called the Magic Looperang, which similarly fit about making a loop out of building blocks. They are both great games, and the Looperang in particular has great potential of being expanded on into a full game due to the breadth of different modular building blocks they could use to make the puzzles with. Ouroboros Corp was an ambient experience where you walk around and get a few upgrades that help you explore more, and you have to loop the building a couple of times. Some people were expecting a chase scene by a monster or something at the end, but I like the atmosphere and the shaders even if that didn't happen. Sometimes it's more about making the player feel like there's more to the game, even if the dev constantly left messages that it was unfinished. Noir Hotel was a great visual use of the loop theme, and it's one of the last games I played during the ratings period. You play through a series of puzzles to find the correct door to open out of a possible 10 in a series of hallways. Choosing wrongly sends you back to reception, which is a really cool visual trick. Choosing right puts you in the next hallway, which is also visually cool to see. I assume the dev is just loading and deloading the areas behind the doors whenever it's needed, but it's still fun to see. One thing I'll take away from Noir Hotel is its use of setting up puzzle elements in advance, like the ticking clock, the mirrors, and the candles in the hallway. The player is aware of them before the puzzle that uses them starts, and it's something they'll turn to when they get stumped. One bit of feedback I'll consider is that it does get a bit annoying walking through the same puzzles to get to where you were. One puzzle on one of the upper floors kind of stumped me, so I went to brute force it and had to walk back to it a bunch of times. I guess that's one of the follies of puzzle games with finite answers though. Players can try and brute force it, like combinations on a lock, for example. The last game, Laser vs. Loop, is a tower defense game where the enemies try to go around the loop. It had a good variety of enemy types, and even if you lost a level, you got to keep the gold you earned to buy more upgrades or traps from the shopkeeper. The art style was very charming, and it was a simple but easily understandable modification to an existing game formula to fit the theme nicely. A couple days later, the results came in and my game did okay. Not great, but alright. Here's the ranks I placed in for each category in their raw or average score from the 44 people that graciously played and rated my game. Out of 9,671 games, my game scored number 2131 on narrative, number 3754 on artwork, number 3844 on audio, number 4659 on creativity, and number 5261 on enjoyment. Womp womp. Combining these ranks together, I placed roughly in rank 3930, which is in the top 50% of 9,657 games, and significantly better than last year. There's no merit working alone compared to in a team, but considering that a lot of the top games had several contributors, I think I did pretty well for a solo dev. I'm glad to see that people liked the artwork in my game and the idea in particular, and I think I scored highly in narrative since my game actually had a story, as thin as it was. The real pain in my side here is the enjoyment, but I think there's a big reason behind it. Everyone who played my game left nice or constructive feedback, which was great to see. I got no comments that were outright trolly or intentionally unkind, but the constructive feedback I did receive was clear. The game felt laggy. Now, I'm chalking that up to two reasons. One of them is probably not my fault, one of them is definitely my fault. The first reason is that the game did actually run slow on some browsers. I don't know if it's just on my machine, but I find a lot of games on Chrome run at a lower frame rate, whereas on Firefox they run just fine. Maybe it's because I have hardware acceleration disabled on Chrome. That might have been the case for some people, but I think most people who are playing were running into the second issue. Updating every second just felt too clunky. I did try to remedy this by having everything shift a half step while moving into position, but even then I guess it felt too choppy. I don't think my idea of a strategic timing-based game was bad, but the way I updated the world was visually unappealing. Some people also said that the camera felt a bit too close to the player, which made it hard to see obstacles right in front of them or in the middle of the screen, which is understandable. If I work on the game some more, I'll try a few different positions to help remedy that. Some people also suggested I try converting or leaning harder into the rhythm aspect, which might also be the way I take it if I do work on it more in the future. Actually, as a fun fact, I chose my background track partly because it fit the theme, but mostly because its tempo is 120 beats per minute, meaning that it synced up with my tile movement that happened every second. So, what did I learn from my GMTK 2025 Game Jam submission? From my own game, I learned that the perception of high frame rate is just as important as the frames themselves. People get turned off if a game looks like it's running slowly, even if it's intentional. From my development, I also realized that it's a pain to set up all of your base systems and actually make the game on the final day, since I had such little time to actually prototype and test it. Again, I only had a build ready for my girlfriend to test by 11:30 p.m. the night before it was due. I would either try to prototype way faster or choose a game idea with systems that can be prototyped faster. A large part of that is also just experience, like how I lost 6 hours trying to detangle my spaghetti code for spawning and controlling my grid. I also remembered that there's only so much mental energy you can put into it in a day, and I found myself getting too tired to work on it after 11 p.m. or so. I did go for my regular daily walks, and I got a gym session in, so I didn't fully sacrifice my health for the jam, and I would recommend you the same. Take care of yourself. From the games I played, and from what I played in previous years, one thing is standing out and screaming at me. Take a simple idea, put a spin on it, and expand it from there. It would probably be good to keep the narrative in mind while designing, but worst case, you can add it in near the end. I might try doing even more programmer art and placeholder assets next time, since I did burn some of my time making the models before I was sure I would use them, even though I did end up using everything I made. Thanks for watching this to the end. I'm working on the script before Mark announces his final favorite game, since I know it's going to be a pain to edit this bad boy. I've also been doing some thinking, and I was originally intending this channel to skew towards game dev, but I don't know so much anymore for two reasons. The first is that I still have a long way to go before I can give any substantial amount of advice, and the second is that those types of channels attract more game devs and players, who are my people, but they're not the ones playing games mostly. I think a part of this channel is me showing how I'm getting a bit better at my craft, which is video editing, animation, and game development every week. Like every wannabe YouTuber, I'd love to make this channel a full-time thing one day, work on games, have my supporters give feedback and help me shape it, then buy it and play the game after it's done. But I want to make sure that I'm providing value to the average Joes watching my videos too. People seem to like the psychological examinations of gaming behavior I've made, and I enjoy making them. Just something I've been thinking about, and I'm glad you were around to hear it. Thanks, I'll see you around.